All right, let's do it.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim here with Jeremiah Meerapfel, and you're watching Cigars Daily. You get a lot more out of this video when you join the community on Cigars Daily Plus and on Rumble, and I'll tell you for this one, you're going to want to do that. There's a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, and I use the term sparingly. I don't call you all ladies and gentlemen very often. I think you're all very familiar with that. But today is sort of an exceptional day for me because I'm sitting next to Jeremiah Meerapfel, who, before I embarrass him too much by going on, I will tell you guys this. Jeremiah and I have been talking, and I'm going to give you the like Polaroid snapshot right now of why this is substantial and why I think this video is important for you. If you talk in the world of cigars about one of the most important types of cigars out there, the Cameroon cigar, some of the most famous cigars in the world, don a real Cameroon wrapper from Africa. That Cameroon wrapper has come from this man's family, the Meerapfel family, the sole proprietors of actual African Cameroon wrapper in the world. I have had the opportunity to sit down and talk with Jeremiah no small amount, and what I have also discovered is a man who inspires me a great deal and has a particularly unique philosophy on handmade premium cigars. And I've asked him today to share a little bit of his story with all of us. And truthfully, we're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of cigar making as well. It's very unique, but I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Tim.
Jeremiah, I don't even know where to dive in with you. I want to bring people along to the conversations that we've had that have left an impression on me. But let's start with this. 415 years of family history in the tobacco world. I'll say this, and then I'm going to start letting you talk, I promise. I very rarely do I meet somebody in the cigar industry who doesn't know what Cigars Daily is. Before you came to this building, you weren't familiar with Cigars Daily. And very rarely do I meet people whose names I didn't already know, and I didn't know your name. And so we had this weird interaction where we're talking with each other. After you left, I made a couple of phone calls to people in the cigar industry that I know and trust, and I'm like, hey, Jeremiah Meerapfel, like this guy, he's the real deal, right? And they're like, are you insane? The Meerapfel family? This is a historic family in the world of not just premium cigars, but tobacco the globe over 415 years. What a legacy, sir. Now I'm going to drop it on you. Tell us about your family.
I'm honored to be here. I have no idea how I'm going to do this because I'm not very versed in any of this. I've been hiding in my cave for the past 35 years, 40 years of my life, whether it's in our plantations in Cameroon or cigar factories, or whatever it might be, or other farms around the world. But
100%.
I'm honored to be here and share the story with everybody out there, whoever you are. I wish that we could be together because I wish that we could have that interaction, but we're going to do this in a different way, and I'm happy to share my story with you, Tim, and with everybody else. So the family started its debut in the cigar industry, the tobacco industry rather, in the early 1600s, where we were trading tobacco from Spain. We're a Sephardi, Jewish Spanish family, and going across to the New World. The name of the family back then wasn't Meerapfel, it was Arafel. Typically people were named after their trade, and Arafel in Old Hebrew, in Old Aramean Hebrew, means smoke. And so that's what we did, and years went by. We ended up going for a short amount of time through the ghetto of Venice and then down to Germany. And Germany greeted us really well. They didn't like the Arafel name. They thought that was ridiculous. We had to Germanize the name. So we were people from the sea. And what is sea in German? It's Meer, M-E-E-R. And then Arafel kind of sounded like Apfel, which is an apple.
It's a mashup.
Exactly. So bingo, we become the Meerapfel family. And so this is in the early 1700s. We're tobacco growing in the area of Michelsfeld, which is in southern Germany, near the Black Forest there, across from Basel, Switzerland. And speed up to 1876. Meyer goes down the road to a small village called Untergrumbach, and he builds a cigar factory. That's the first Meerapfel cigar factory in 1876. A lot of people relate our family to 1876 because that's when we first established our cigar production. And this goes on for quite some time. We're growing a lot of tobacco, we're making cigars for the market, and Mayor's son, Ernest, who's he's a bit of a rebel in the family, or he was known to be a rebel in the family. He decides that he wants to be like his ancestors. So what does he do? He jumps on a boat in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, somewhere in the Netherlands, and he sails off to Indonesia. And that was crazy. This is the early 1900s. It's insane to do something like this. And
that's a long travel. But I mean, it's not like a 14-hour flight. Even you're sailing for weeks or months.
Right. He wants to play the pirate like his ancestors. So he does this, and he arrives in Indonesia and Sumatra, and quickly becomes one of the largest traders. He brings Sumatra back to the Netherlands, where it's used on the Dutch cigars, and in Germany, where it's used on the handmade premium cigars that we were producing. Fast forwarding through all of the periods, just to have an overall view of what we've been through. We're in the mid 1930s. Things start getting really difficult in Germany, very, very difficult, and the family, who had a political branch to it, they were very involved in politics in southern Germany, very early on are told, guys, don't stick around. This is not going to
get out.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
And so we go through the Netherlands and make our way to the United States of America, the greatest country on the planet. And we get to the United States, and my grandfather goes through a very brief moment of 6 months, 9 months of growing tobacco in Florida. And that's not too successful. And then he makes his way to Cuba. And when he's in Cuba, he meets a young man who's the Minister of Industry in Cuba. And they become extremely close. And my grandfather ends up being the largest exporter of Cuban tobacco in history. The man was called Che Guevara, Ernesto Guevara, and then history moves on. Revolution starts brewing up. It's a disaster. It turns out to be a complete disaster. And my grandfather leaves Cuba with a couple of things in his back pocket. He leaves through the United States and back to Europe. The trading, the Cuba tobacco trading for Cuban tobacco, which we continue to do even after my father passed away, actually in the mid 2000s. But also with a license for the distribution of premium cigars. So in those days it was Cuba tobacco. Later on it was renamed Habanos, for those who know Habanos.
You recognize Habanos SA on the stickers.
Yes, and. So he went back to Europe early 1960s, and he starts developing these super premium Cuban brands in the Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, which was the base of the European Union.
You mentioned the name of a little brand yesterday when you were telling me this. A little brand, it was kind of a startup.
Right. So the Cuban government asked him to launch a brand in Europe. So he had the honor of being the first to launch this onto the markets. The small brand was called Cohiba for the Cuban government. So that was another cool thing, another milestone which was important, and another element which added to the perceived notoriety, so to speak, of what we're, of the part of history that Heller, which was a hell of a character, my grandfather lived through. It was just extraordinary. And for the anecdotes, some of those watching might know this. One of the close friends of the trio there in Cuba was called Ernest Hemingway, and my grandfather smuggled some of Ernest's books, if you like, out of Cuba to get it out of the collapsing regimes, and outside brought him to the University of Princeton University, and brought him to the United States, handed him over to Princeton University, and that salvaged quite a few of the manuscripts of Ernest Hemingway. Let's speed up a little bit. We'll kind of be jumping around. 1950s, no more Cuban tobacco in the United States of America. There's a big problem. The United States was a massive producer of cigars with Cuban tobacco before the Revolution, and they need to find a substitute. And my grandfather starts working with a French monopoly who is producing tobacco in what we call Cameroon. Now, This is an area which is east of Cameroon and west of the Central African Republic.
Sorry to interrupt you. So you say Cameroon. So before this time, Cameroon, Africa was not a big producer of tobacco, or
it was a very big producer of tobacco.
Okay.
It was producing for the French industry of cigarettes mostly, and for machine made.
Okay.
So in France, they were producing the Gauloises, the Gitanes, which were this black tobacco cigarettes, which was the industry before the war. I mean, it's only really after the Second World War that what we call the blonde cigarettes really took off and replaced all of that. But back in those days, it was very different. It actually, the tobacco resembled much more what a cigar could be than.
Yeah. Like, this is why we say don't inhale a cigar, because the tobacco is really powerful, really bold, and harsh for your insides. And so you're saying cigarettes were made out of this stuff before?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
All right.
Cigarettes were made out of this stuff before, and that's why back in those days, you'd have a cigarette and you wouldn't have another one for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours. I mean, people weren't. You got that nicotine, and you were fine for half the day. I don't know what they do today, but what I see is that people just chain smoke. I guess something else is going on. So he's working there, and in 1969, my father Richard, he's 18 years old, and he goes to Africa. He goes to the jungle and he lives there, and that kind of changed the course of our family history once again, because he falls in love with the place. We called him the friend of the pygmies, because he was one of the only people ever to be brought into the pygmy tribe. It's really crazy. Other tribes would never, be invited into the pygmies tribes, yet alone a foreigner, someone from outside. He falls in love with the place. And so time goes on, and we're in the 1960s now, and my grandfather is back in Europe, and we're distributing these Cuban cigars, and we're trading the Cuban tobacco. And my grandfather has some friends in the industry that are like, well, help us out here. We're making cigars. This is the 1960s. We're making cigars in the Dominican Republic. Can you help us out? And the first one to do that was Fernando Leon, who was Guillermo's father, and they're still around today, the oldest cigar factory in the Dominican Republic. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable people, really gentlemen. And Fernando loved Cameroon. It was his favorite tobacco. And my grandfather was like, yeah, there's no problem. So, bought some cigars, brought them into the Eastern Hemisphere. This was one of the first times any non-Cuban brands, premium, were being introduced. Nobody in Europe was smoking non-Cuban cigars.
But also in Europe, certainly not. But in the United States, we sort of ended up with a vacuum after the embargo, did we not?
Yeah, well, a lot of the families left Cuba, and started trying to figure out where they were going to get back into the crafts. Some of them went to Honduras, Nicaragua. Some went to the Dominican Republic, some even went to the Canary Islands. And so I think this Cuban heritage, the families were trying to understand, like, where are we going to be able to recreate? Where are we going to be able to do this? And a lot of them, ended up in the Caribbean making cigars for the U.S. market. In those days, it was the U.S. market was it was different. It was very, very different. Yeah. A lot of Connecticut shade wrapper, a lot of Candela wrapper, a lot of the there was like this new wave of smokers, and it was growing. So that was the first family that we helped. The second was the Coleman family, who were the founders of General Cigar Company.
And just as a point of reference for all of you watching at home, he mentions General Cigar Company and the Colemans. General Cigar Company today is responsible for creating and distributing brands in the United States like Cohiba, Punch, Hoya de Monterrey, Macanudo, Diesel, Partagas, La Gloria Cubana, and a bunch of others that I just didn't mention, like the largest cigar company in America today.
Yeah, and back then it was also the largest cigar company. They created Cohiba with African Cameroon. They created Partagas with African Cameroon, and they were the largest cigar company in the world back then, no question about it. And then in the early '80s, there was another family who started out and got very, very, very close to the family. My father was extremely, extremely close to both father and son, which was the Fuente family, and they also asked us to help them out selling cigars in the Eastern Hemisphere. So my father was like, yeah, great, but we're going to have to change the blends around a bit, because this kind of stuff, this Connecticut / Candela, etc., it's gonna have a hard time. So Carlos Sr. and my father reblended the Don Carlos line for the European Union.
Wow.
And that cigar was amazing, because that cigar and 30 years, 40 years of working the markets is really what, in my humble opinion, what kind of opened the gateways for non-Cuban cigars to gain the notoriety that they deserved in the Eastern Hemisphere, and becoming one of the. I mean, today Fuentes easily number after Cuba, it's probably top one or two cigar companies in terms of notoriety and in terms of
absolutely
in the Eastern Hemisphere. That was a lot of work. That was a lot of work, and it was a lot of 40 years of work. And but the rest is history. We're building these non-Cuban cigar brands, and then focusing, as most people know, focusing on Arturo Fuente, especially over the last 20, 30 years. And in 1992, the French monopoly decides that it doesn't want to grow tobacco really in Cameroon and Central Africa anymore. The cigarette industry collapsed. The black tobacco cigarette industry collapsed, and it just really didn't make sense for them to continue. And so remember, I was mentioning that my father had this really strong connection down there, and this insane bond with the people down in the region of the Cadi. We call it the region of the Cadi. And he's like, no, this is not happening. This is not happening because all of these people that I worked with, these people that I lived with, they are going to be in deep, deep trouble. They're going to lose everything. There's nothing else going on there. Nothing, apart from wood basically. But
right.
You don't need those people for wood. These companies come in and they just break everything down, or gold or diamonds. Those are disastrous industries.
Right.
But there's nothing that requires true labor. Right, and so there's these hundreds of thousands of people, families, which are going to end up in serious trouble. And so I remember that. It was 1992. I remember he got into his car. He drove to Paris. He sat down with the government. He said, "Listen, I'm buying out the French monopoly. I'm going to buy you guys out." And they said, "Okay, let's talk money now. You want to buy us out? Fine." And he bought him out. But remember, he bought him out for the people. He didn't buy him out for, he bought him out because of his love, his infatuation of the people down there, and his life. It was his life. And that dictated a lot of things that he did over the course of the following 10 years.
Yeah.
First of all, he went back in, saved Cameroon tobacco. He saved Cameroon tobacco. And he also saved a shitload of brands, because a lot of these brands which built themselves on Cameroon. Remember, this was during the boom in the U.S., right? So if General Cigar or Fuentes or any of these brands that depended on Cameroon lost it during the boom, it's questionable whether they would be around anymore today.
Sure.
He went in there and he fought. And it's hard. I mean, I could sit here for quite some time explaining to everybody out there what it's like working in the African rainforest. It's crazy. This is the place that there's the most snakes per square foot on the planet. You got lions, and you got leopards, and you got gorillas, and you got hippopotamus, and mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are the worst.
And they're super deadly there too.
And they can be extremely deadly. The water, everything. It's a rough place
designed to kill you.
Yeah. I've taken a few people over the years. Most manufacturers, I don't think any manufacturer has ever set foot in Cameroon, by the way.
Yeah.
But some of their buyers have. Like the tobacco buyers, and we have a few journalists. James Suckling from the Cigar Aficionado.
Yeah.
Back in the day, he came, wrote he was, and I remember in Brussels before he went to Cameroon, he was sitting down there. We were at a Chinese restaurant in Brussels, and James was sitting around the table, and it was my father, my mom, my brother, my sister, myself, and James, right? And he was sitting there. He was petrified. He was white. And we're like, "James, are you okay?" And he's like, "I feel like I'm having my last supper." And he went to Cameroon, and he reiterated that during in his article.
I bet.
It was crazy, and it is crazy, and it's still crazy. It's really freaky. But I love it. I mean, I've been doing it my whole life. So my father's there doing his thing, and he feels this huge sense of responsibility, both for his people in Cameroon, right? But also for the manufacturers. He's like, I got to get this tobacco for them. This is super important. This is my responsibility. I took upon me, to be able to deliver Cameroon tobacco to the industry, and I need to protect my family in Cameroon. I need to protect the people in Cameroon. This continues until 2003. And in 2003, there's a coup d'etat in Central Africa. There's a general that walks into the capital, takes over the presidency, and expropriates everybody.
Now that right there sounds like a colossal cliffhanger to me. And that's what I'm going to do to all of you right now. Here's what I'm going to tell you. This man, when he walked into my building today, said, I need a cigar. And he hasn't smoked a cigar since he's been here. So we're going to go to Rumble to do that. And we're going to talk about what happens when the country where you're growing tobacco collapses. We're going to continue this video on Rumble and on Cigars Daily Plus so that this dear man can light up his cigar right now because he's been so patiently waiting and pouring out his heart to all of you. So join us on Rumble and on Cigars Daily Plus. Any questions you have about Cameroon, African Cameroon cigars, or the Meerapfel family, drop them down in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you guys on Plus and Rumble.